All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our follow up on our Navigating Adult ADHD diagnosis with the HMC presenting this. We are very happy to have several people here today joining us. My name is Megan Kelly. I'm the VP of Global Operations for eXp Realty, and I'm lucky enough to work with all of these lovely people. So I'd love for us to introduce ourselves. Cody, I'll start with you.
Hey everybody, I'm Cody Gilkison. I'm the Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm also the staff chair of One EXP and co-founder of the Healthy Mind Collective.
Amazing. All right. And we got Morgan Johnson joining us as well.
Hi, I'm Morgan Johnson. I'm a DEI communications coordinator.
Nice to see you here. Thank you for joining us. And thank you both for letting me host this today. I'm very humbled to be able to be here again and talk to y'all. And last but not least, we have the HMC chair, Carly.
Hi, y'all. So I am the HMC chair as well as the Global Transactions Director. The lovely Miss Megan Kelly is my boss.
It's a pleasure to work with you. We're colleagues. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm very excited to be able to host this and ask this amazing group some questions that relate to, how do you navigate adulthood ADHD diagnosis, and what have been some challenges, some insights, and some things that we can all learn from. So just to start with, I'd love to hear a little bit about everybody's personal journey. So maybe starting with Morgan, can you share your journey of receiving an adult ADHD diagnosis, and any challenges and revelations that may have emerged during your process?
Yeah, so when I was diagnosed with ADHD, it actually happened, I want to say right when I was getting into the working class of people. What happened was I was kind of like going through a lot of ups and downs. I didn't know why I was so impulsive. I didn't know why I couldn't pay attention to certain things. I didn't understand it because it just what happened. It started in high school. So I went to a counselor. Once I told him all of the symptoms I was going through, he sent me to a psychologist who gave me a test, and then that's how I found out that I had ADHD. I was actually kind of relieved because I thought I was like thought I was mentally ill at one point. Like I thought they were gonna put me inside of an insane asylum. Um, but like finally understanding what I was going through and knowing the symptoms and learning how to really combat it at the level that I'm at it's been great. So I to be honest, it was a relief to be diagnosed with ADHD. I know that sounds weird, but it was a relief for me.
No, I mean, to me, I think that makes sense because, some of these things, even though it's not that strange, like you're not doing anything erratic or like, going crazy,
Yeah.
but you feel different and you feel like something's off because you're not matching what everybody else is talking about. So
Yeah.
when you hear something like that, it's almost like you get chills, or like, you're like, oh, it's not me per se. Like
Right.
there's a reason I'm the way I am, and it's okay.
Yes.
So I think to me, a relief was a similar, journey for myself to be like, okay, now I can actually focus on people and do what I need to do. So it definitely was a relief for me as well. So I can appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
All right, Carly, Miss Carly.
So I think I might be the only one that was actually diagnosed when I was a child. And I was on medication growing up, and then I got off of it when I was old enough to make the decision myself. And then as an adult, decided that if I wanted to be, very successful in a corporate career, I needed to, get back onto medication so that I could focus on a single thought and, finish something. So I got diagnosed as a kid, and then, kind of introduced myself back into medication as an adult. So.
And I think there's a lot to be said for not being able to focus too. I think we have some strengths that others don't, because we can have that time where we can think of 20 different things and pull it all into one thought. And that's really hard for a lot of people that aren't ADHD and don't have the capability, need to focus just on one thing at a time only, and where we can like pull things from the sky and be like, oh, in 1992, so and so walked on the moon or something, whatever it is. All right, Cody.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago. I always had trouble in college and in my work life with being able to do my work in the same way as other people, right? I hyper focus on something, and if I am focused on that thing and something else comes up, it derails me completely, and what it used to manifest as was anger, right? So if I'm at work and they tell me I need to do something a certain way, but I can clearly see there's a better way to do it, I'm just going to be mad, or I'm going to do it and ask for permission, for forgiveness later. You know what I mean? So it always manifested for me in that way. When I got my ADHD diagnosis, it's one of those things where in the same breath, it was like disbelief and also like, oh, everything makes sense now, like, you're right. As they're asking me the questions, it was like, oh, yes, I am that. Oh, yeah, I do that. Oh my God, yes, I do that. Like every single one, it just wasn't what I was expecting. Because in my journey, I have other mental health issues. I have major depression. I have a major anxiety disorder. I'm an insomniac. And all of those things I've been treating as the primary issue for a really long time. But really, they were symptoms of my life with ADHD, which was being untreated, right? And treatment for me meant understanding how I worked differently and learning to embrace that. And to some extent medication, but I use my medication only when I know I will need it, because I'm somebody that's kind of afraid of my medication. So I'm not a regular taker of my medication, but most days I'm happy to say I'm able to structure my day in such a way that it makes sense for me and I can move forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting how we all have had conversations prior to this to prepare for the panel. We all talked about how we use the medication a little bit differently. Like I think Carly and I are similar, where we don't take it on the weekends because that's our time to just be a little bit all over the place, and it's fun and you can do what you need to do. But then some days where I know I'm going to have a very intense day in spreadsheets or something like that, and I need to like just put blinders on and sit down, and that's the day I would take my medication. And that's something for me, for my personal journey. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, when nobody came to me. I just was like, you know what, let me just see, because I just have always worked a little bit differently and thought a little bit differently and been a little bit all over the place. So I went to my doctor, I did the test and everything. And when I did start taking some medication, it was like I could retain everything that people were saying to me in a meeting. I wasn't like thinking about like the next thing that I had to work on, or something at home, or that's my problem, is I have a hard time just like focusing on the task of the moment. And I still do. Carly will tell you, she works with me every day. But it's a lot better. So imagine what it's like without.
Yeah.
So it's been eye-opening for me to be able to, and that's the thing. I like that all of us here say, everybody handles it a little bit differently. There's different types of ADHD. There's different ways you're affected, and if you need medication or not, and how much and when. It's not something that you have to take every morning. It's not, high blood pressure. It's, something that you can figure out what is the right mix for you personally, which I think is really cool. So speaking about that, I'm going to hop around on these questions a little bit, if you don't mind. Going with the flow. We've got, ADHD, it's sometimes like stigmatized or misunderstood. We're all talking here about different ways that we all are affected by it, but and handle it, but it's all the same, similar not challenges. I don't want to say challenges, opportunities. So, Carly, I'll start with you. What steps do you think can be taken on a societal level to break down the stigmas and promote more of an inclusive understanding of neurodiversity?
So we were talking about this the other day that, my daughter was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and so I've done a lot of research in her diagnosis, because when I look at her versus me, we're completely different, right? She gets hyper focused on things, whereas me, I can't focus on anything but on medication. So knowing that there's so many different versions of ADHD, and it's not just one thing, right? Like, we're not just all over here, just head in the clouds, like can't focus. Like, that's not everybody's version of ADHD. There's so many different ones, and so just not putting everybody into this one category, right, of ADHD. Doing the research to see that there are different kinds, and we don't all just fit into one. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think to your point, like doing calls like this to get out there and show, like, there's very different ways that it shows up, and just talking about it openly. I mean, like we are here right now, I think is huge. Cody, would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this flows directly into what I was going to say. Is I think that the portrayal of ADHD is very, like Carly said, people's heads are in the clouds. They can't concentrate on anything. The other unfortunate stigma that we get is that ADHD diagnoses are on the rise, and it's just people trying to make a buck off of you, or this idea that it's part of this sort of, ooh, look at me thing, like we're doing it for attention kind of deal. So I think it's super, super important that folks with ADHD talk openly about what their daily struggles are like and why they use the medication and what it does for them and how it's changed their life. So that people understand, like, I'm not talking about like, oh, I can get a little hyper sometimes. Sometimes people use that as a joke, like when they're not paying attention during a conversation, they'll say, sorry, I'm a little ADHD. Like, that's not the reality of what we deal with, right? Like, I dealt with over a decade of constantly being angry because I was a square peg trying to fit myself in a round hole, and I figured out that I could make my jobs square holes too, and change my life, when I got my diagnosis. So I think that's what I would say is really important about breaking the stigmas. And I just think that it's important that we recognize that everybody's journey is different. And it really, it's a rare, small percentage of folks who claim to have a diagnosis just for attention, right?
Yeah. Because nobody really talks about it too much.
Yeah, right. And that's a lot of us, even me. Like, I don't regularly tell people, like, the reason that I do my work this way, which looks weird to you, is because I'm amazing at doing it. You know what I mean? And part of that is, like when I'm working on a team, say I'm working on a team with spreadsheets and they want it done in a certain way, right? If I say, I have a way that I need to organize this spreadsheet in order to make my thoughts come together, and I'm going to be able to do this work faster than anybody else on your team. Not only is that something that a manager should allow as an accommodation for someone with ADHD, but if you watched how I did the work, you probably could learn something about making your process more efficient too, right? This is more than just like some thing that I have to work around. Like, I have a superpower to make your work more efficient. That you should use that, right?
Yeah.
There's not a more clear message I can give you to embrace neurodiversity on your teams.
And I think I think for me, you had two really cool points there. Like, I think, something I've stopped doing, because I have, like if the fonts aren't the same size, or if one's bold and something's not and everything, I've in the past have said like, oh, sorry, that's like my little bit of my OCD tendencies. And I realize that OCD is a very serious, issue that people struggle with, and they overcome it or deal with it and work through it. But I shouldn't say that. It's not funny. And so I've stopped saying that. I make sure that I don't, because to me, it's similar to what you're saying about ADHD. It's turned into this comical thing almost, where if you look at TikTok in the past 2-3 years, it's everybody's ADHD, and you can, I don't know about y'all, but my feed, I don't go on it anymore. But when I was in the mix of it, I was constantly seeing videos about ADHD, and it was like everybody's getting diagnosed. Then we had the shortage of medication because everybody was getting diagnosed.
So and that's not because more people are ADHD now than ever. I think there's a little bit of that because of technology, but honestly, people have always been ADHD. This is a common problem for the human brain.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So it's been. Go ahead.
I was going to say to the comment about, where we're like, oh, that's just my ADHD. Now, I always call it squirreling, right? Because everybody squirrels. Whether you have ADHD or not, everybody squirrels, right? Like, so, if you're doing something, like we're talking and then something comes in my mind and I'm like, well, squirrel,
Yeah, right.
Everybody has that. So I just say squirreling.
That's a good alternative word. I like that.
I used to just think I was very smart because I can think of so many different things at one time and pull them together into one thing. And I think it's just because I have my little neurodiversity. So I just thought I was really super intelligent, and maybe I am also, but I think it's the fact that I think differently than other people. I would think through, the next 20 steps in advance and take into account all these different areas and be able to see what could possibly go wrong, where other people didn't necessarily think the same way I did or get to the same conclusion. They needed to walk through things a little bit more or whatever. So it's definitely interesting. And I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much. Morgan, what do you think?
For me,
but I have seen you maneuver a spreadsheet. You are very intelligent. Okay.
Thank you.
For me, I think what a major factor in the African American community is kind of, we're not really prepared, or we don't really talk about those things. So like talking about it with my family and, telling my mom like, hey, this is what's going on with me at that age. My mom eventually went to get a psychology degree. So now she understands. But, before then, I don't believe that. Sometimes it's like, don't claim something that you don't have, even though I was diagnosed with it. So that's like a big thing. Like, don't claim that you have that. Don't put life to that. God will help you type situation. That's kind of what I dealt with. So I think just getting more knowledge out in the African American community, just as to what ADHD is and why your kid may act this way, would help my end of things. I guess it would have helped me as a kid for my mom to have that. This is why your daughter is acting like this in high school. This is why she's behaving this way. She's not crazy. She's just, you know what I mean? She's going through something ADHD wise. So that was a big thing for me growing up.
Yeah. Now, did you have anybody in like school or, and that's where I wonder how we could, from a societal point of view, did you have anybody talking to you about any of the challenges you were having outside of your family?
My counselor. So this is one thing I was telling my mom earlier, because I kind of talked to her about it a little bit. I had a counselor in high school that one of my big dreams since I was little was I wanted to go to Spelman in Atlanta. It's a historically Black college. That was my thing. I was hyper focused on going to Spelman. But I had a counselor. He knew that I wasn't paying attention. He knew I wasn't applying myself. He knew that I could get better grades if I tried. But this one thing that my mom reminded me, he said, was, you'll never go to Spelman. You'll never go to a university. You'll go to a community college first. And that kind of stuck with me. Like, instead of trying to help what I was going through, he kind of just put that doubt in my head. And since I have ADHD, I didn't know that at the time. I kind of focused on that and I let that be my reality. So I never went to Spelman. I did go to a university, but I never went to Spelman. So that's like one of the big things now that I didn't realize until my mom told me that I focused on, and I kept that, like I harbored that inside of me because I let someone tell me I can't do something. And I think people without ADHD, they don't obsess. And I just realized that that's something I obsessed over. And I let that become my reality. So yeah, I didn't really have anyone to talk to about my ADHD because everyone around me was negative, except for my mother. She was trying to understand it. But, like my counselors, my school, they were all negative about it.
Yeah. I mean, not to be an empathy coach here, but for anybody hearing that story, that's your clear indication that there are kids out there who are hearing words like this and need you, right?
Yeah.
To be that positive influence and tell them they can do it, right?
Right.
And Morgan, we were talking about this last week about, with my daughter, and she was at school and she was talking to a little girl and of a different ethnicity, and Remy was telling her that she had just got diagnosed with ADHD and she was starting some new medication, and the girl told her that her mom and her both had ADHD, but there was no medication for it. And Remy was like, there is medication, I just started it. And so it's still that stigma around medication, especially I think with children, right? That you don't want, children shouldn't be taking medication, at such a young age. But I mean, from 4 weeks ago when she got diagnosed to today, her grades have significantly improved because she's extremely smart. She just doesn't take the time to stop and read the questions and stuff. So it's just that little, medication just has allowed her to slow down and let her brain process and think, focus on one thing. And so there's still that stigma around medication.
Yeah. And I think if my mom had that option, or if, people who, like my school would have said, hey, you might want to get Morgan tested for this and that, I could have gone on to probably go to Spelman. But I feel like I think I was like one of two African Americans at that school. So they didn't really take time to educate my mom, who was a single Black mother trying to survive and not understanding why her daughter is not applying herself. That's what they called it. I wasn't applying myself. I think that's huge. They tell you you're not applying yourself enough. You're not trying hard enough. And at the end of the day, like I really mentally could not, because I just couldn't focus on one thing. I was focusing on multiple things. When I was younger, it was very easy for me, I guess, to excel in that. But as I got older, it just kind of, everything just started jumbling in my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this when we get to talking about intersectionality, but that's a common problem. That's called CIC, or culturally inappropriate care. That a school guidance counselor, a doctor, a therapist, anybody can do that if they just are not coming at you from a level of understanding your background. Right. Yeah.
Well, we can lead into that intersectionality question there with that perfect lead in. So why don't we start with, I know we just had Morgan talking, so maybe we can start with Cody. How do you think factors like gender, ethnicity, cultural background intersect with the experience of receiving an adult ADHD diagnosis, and what unique challenges or perspectives might arise?
Yeah, I think, it all comes down to what kind of care you go out for, I think, and whether you're receiving appropriate care. And you have to be a good advocate for yourself when you get an ADHD diagnosis as an adult, because you will have adults in your life, no matter how accepting your family or your spouse or whatever, that think, oh boy, here's another thing, don't take it as seriously as you may, right? So you have to really advocate for yourself. And one of those things is about CIC. It's about culturally inappropriate care, and recognizing that if you go to a therapist and they have a different background than you, or even if they have the same background as you, and they're leaning into stigmas about your background and generalizations about your background that don't relate to you personally, they're not the only person in the game, right? You can and should seek alternative care. It can feel like when you get an ADHD diagnosis that the first therapist you go to, or the therapist that gives you the diagnosis, is your lifeline that you need to stick with, but that's not the case, right? And that's not me saying you should go out and get a second opinion about your ADHD diagnosis. You will know if this feels right for you. But, you know, you need to find care that can meet you where you are. I, for instance, have sat across from a gay male therapist of my age who almost even looked like me, to be honest with you, who just was not meeting me where I was, who was leaning into a stereotype about the kind of person that I probably the generic version of myself would be, you know. And meanwhile, on the other side of the token, I've had a 90-year-old woman therapist who couldn't be more different than me, who understood me like I was an open book in front of her, right? After a couple of conversations. You never know who that person is going to be. I also think that it really comes down to something Morgan alluded to, is this cultural issue, right? Which, for her, coming from a Black family who has their views on mental health that are different than a white family, that are different than a Hispanic family, everybody has their own journey to tread that way, right? For me, growing up in a Southern Baptist family, mental health was like, my parents didn't want to talk about mental health until I came out of the closet. Then they were like, you need therapy, right?
It's taboo, right?
Right. No, it was only, you know, certain things. But, you know, when I was, you know, diagnosed with depression, they were like, okay, we'll medicate it and then we're never going to talk about it again, right? But the antidepressants were never great for me, right? Because we were, again, treating a symptom and not the real problem. But that's, you know, something that we have to recognize is that people from different backgrounds have really super different experiences with coming to terms with their diagnosis and having understanding among their family and peers.
I think it's interesting because when I was 5, my parents got divorced and we moved from New Jersey to California. And so anyway, long story short, we were like, my mother is a very big believer in therapy. But it was always about, I was always having challenges because of the divorce, because of the move. There was never a look at anything broader. It was because of the situation I was in. And, you know, just listening to you guys actually just made me realize that. So thank you. I never really thought about it that way, but we were over therapized. But yeah, no, I never really realized that they never even focused on what my feelings were. It was what my mother told them she thought I was dealing with.
Yeah, that's mine was super. When I say like, I went to a lot of therapy when I was a kid, but it was about trying to figure out why I was gay. Like, they were treating me for depression because they thought I was gay because I was depressed, right? That's the way that backwards kind of.
I have a lot of depressed friends. Sorry, Curly.
No, I'm saying I hear all these things from you guys, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm sending Remy to therapy. Like, is she, you know? But I let her make the decisions. We educate her fully, and then as far as the medication piece, if she wanted to take the medication, that was completely up to her. We educated her. She talked to other kids who are on medication now, who had got diagnosed beforehand. But I feel like as a parent, I get judged for giving her medication at such a young age. So I kind of feel, I don't want to say embarrassed, but like I'm like very hesitant to say anything about it because I'm like, they're going to judge me.
I feel like they're going to judge you if you do or if you don't. So do you and what your daughter's comfortable with.
I know.
Yeah, there's stigmas both ways. I really have seen that, like, you know, the parents say, my child is diagnosed with ADHD, but we believe in going a holistic route, you're going to get judged for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My child has ADHD, but we don't believe in medication, you're going to get judged for that. My child has ADHD and she's on, you know, whatever the medication is, you're going to get judged for that too. It's so true. There's stigmas about every part of this. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yep. Morgan,
One
how
more thing
about?
about this?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna
Nope.
say the different types of medication is that everyone's always like the, you know, the Ritalin and Adderall and all the stimulants, but there are non-stimulants as well that you can take that, you know, are not, you know, aren't addictive, don't have the same side effects. So I think it's also, I should have thrown that in there as well before, but there's also that.
Yeah.
Morgan, what are your thoughts on intersectionality? I know you touched on it before a little bit.
Yeah. So like I was saying before, like, you know, being an African American family who's Pentecostal Christian, believes in the Holy Ghost, speak in tongues, all that. We don't, I guess like the main thing is the Lord can heal you and the Lord can save you and the Lord can clear your mind. Now, I believe that to a certain extent, but when it comes to like mental health, I think that he gives you common sense. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to say it didn't help me. It helped me with the depression aspect of, you know, my diagnosis, but it didn't help me with coming to terms and understanding why I was doing what I was doing. Like a huge thing that I knew something was wrong, like just one of the major key factors was very impulsive. I acted on things that I just immediately thought of, like just dumb stuff, like kind of like childish things. I guess like one example of that is I worked at a job like when I was younger, and for some reason I just wanted to write on the wall. I don't know why. I can't give you like a good explanation. But that's why I was talking to my mom about this week, and I was like, she was like, "Why did you do that? Like, why did you deface the?" I was like, I just had a thought, felt right, felt good, and when I was doing it, I kind of like compared it to when you're in love and you really want to have your first kiss with someone, and if you don't act on that, like if you don't do it, you're just like, oh, like you just want to do it, like it's bubbling inside of you to do it. So there's a lot of things in my life that I did that I realize is childish now, but I was literally acting on impulse. And that impulse just is a random thought in my head. I just want to do it, so I do it. And I don't really know why I wanted to do it. It just happened. So, you know, I did that a lot when I was younger. I would collect rocks, put them in the freezer. Like I did weird things when I was young that my mom just thought I was a weirdo for, or I wanted to be like a scientist. So again, you know, going back to that, not understanding why your child is doing what they're doing and just not saying, well, she's just going to be a little weird when she gets older. I feel like, again, the African American community, they had the tools to understand, and, you know, not just relying on their pastor at their church, not just relying on family to talk about their kid. Like it would be a lot better for us to have more knowledge and materials to understand ADHD.
Yeah, that's so true. And, you know, I like to, when we get the argument about religion and, you know, you're created perfect and that kind of thing, it's the fact that the human brain is an imperfect organ, right? And I think we can relate that back to the human body is an imperfect organ, right? Do you know anyone whose body is perfect? Doesn't have weird hairs growing, has never had acne, doesn't have a weird smell on their feet when they wear their socks for too long. You know, like so brains are the same way as like our skin and our smell and all of those things. Everybody's is different, right? Yeah. And if we're all going to be different, they're not all going to work perfectly. And I also believe I give this, you know, spiel every time I do a talk about DEI, I feel like, but that 90% of people, I think it's higher than 90% of people actually, when they have a real or perceived detrimental quality about themselves, they overcome that by having some sort of balanced great genius level strength that pops up in response to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody goes through adversity, what they do to respond to that adversity usually ends up giving them a superpower. That's the way I like to phrase it, right? Like with mine, when I hyper focus on something, I notice every detail. And when I say every detail, imagine that I'm emphasizing that by saying every curse word detail. Like I mean every detail, right? Which makes me really, really good at being detail oriented about stuff. When we're talking through a new project, Morgan, you know that I'm somebody that's like, I don't miss anything before we get started. It's rare something's going to fall through the cracks with me.
Yeah, very true.
But that's a superpower that I developed because I have ADHD. So,
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think everybody on this call is similar in that respect, where it's just you've adapted certain things to be what your superpower is, and how do you harness it and make sure that you're not, frustrating people or frustrating your managers. Like trying to explain what my department does. I can't do that in a simple, high level 4 bullet point, strategic macro, whatever corporate buzzword you need, because it's hard for me because there's so much. So I have to constantly be fighting that, urge to have that like detail and be like, these are all the things that we're working on. And it's beautiful because not everybody can take in all of that at once. So I have to try to learn how, and not everybody needs to, not that everybody needs to hear every detail, but trying to summarize how big and how everything that we're doing, it's a struggle for me because I want to go into the details. So I totally feel that. Let's see here. What else? So that leads into workplace inclusivity. So, thinking about Carly in the context of, the workplace, how can organizations foster inclusivity and support individuals with adult ADHD diagnosis? Do you have any specific accommodations or practices that you've seen or thought of or felt from previous employers or wherever that you believe enhance the workplace environment for neurodivergent individuals?
I think just I don't know if you want to explain yourself to your boss or your manager, or let them know that you are learn different. I don't know if you want to explain that, but I think for me as a manager, I allow people to learn and work however is going to be best for them. I'm not a micromanager. I say, here's the task, however you get from point A to point B, as long as it's correct, and then I don't honestly care how you do that. So being open and understanding of people's different learning styles, work styles, and just opening and creating an inclusive space for that is personally how I try to handle it being a manager. And I've been very lucky to have all amazing bosses who do the same.
Paid advertisement. So Morgan, what about you? Because I know Cody has a lot on this, so I'm starting with you too. So because I figure we can have Cody come in and be the closer on this one as far as this question.
Yeah. So for me, I had a manager that I worked with for, I want to say like 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. I don't know how long, but she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So when I told her, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and this is how I maneuver my work environment, because a big thing for me is I'm one of the creative in my mind type ADHD. Like that's how mine comes out, is I'm very creative and thoughtful, like when it comes to art, music, stuff like that. So one thing is I have to play music sometimes really loud in order for me to focus. And another thing, I have to be doing something that is equally as like dope to me. So like playing a game on my phone, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram as I'm working. That's something that helps me stay interested in my work. And she understood that, and she allowed me to do that. So that was very big and very huge for me when I was, coming up in like in corporate America, because I didn't have that understanding prior to her. So it was very huge for me to get someone that got, hey, I'm not focusing on something, I'm just multitasking with my mind. Like, I'm sorry, my music is loud at my desk. She understood that, and she told people that's what I needed to get my job done, and I got it done very well, in my personal opinion, not to brag.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I feel like people sometimes go through phases too. Like, I went through 3 or 4 years where I had to have music on. I'd have my headphones on. That would help me focus. Now, if I listen to music, all I can do is think about the lyrics, and I can't focus on what I'm doing. So I have to have dead silence or classical music now.
That's it. Music without lyrics is how I do it too. Yeah.
Megan, I'm the same. I have to have classical music, or
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, for me, it's like listening. I don't even listen to the lyrics. I can't pay attention to the lyrics. It's listening to my mind picks up on the instrumental part of it. So, like, if I'm playing like a rap song or R&B song, there's certain songs I have to listen to that I've gathered like a playlist of, that something in that instrumental unlocks like a creative ability in my mind. Like, there'll be a certain part where a song just like goes from here to here. I don't really know how to describe it, but it unlocks my brain in some weird way, and it makes me feel normal for that part of time that I'm listening to the song. Maybe like 2 minutes 30 seconds.
There's if you go on Spotify and you look up neurodivergent playlists, there's a lot of playlists out there that have like the right beat and the right tempo, and like it goes back with that. And it's not so much the back and forth that a lot of people were sending around again on TikTok recently, but it's the beat to the music and the time of it that is helpful. So I found some of those playlists helpful, and then I don't have to cultivate it.
I'm gonna have to try those.
It's kind of nice. Yeah, all right, Cody, what are your thoughts on inclusivity in the workplace?
Yeah. First, I just said, that when Morgan said I can listen to the songs and not listen to the lyrics, that's like it's like you might as well have been speaking in another language to me. I cannot comprehend that.
Not possible.
I cannot comprehend. Anyway, so with me, I really think it's important that we also recognize that kind of behavior that Morgan's talking about, needing to scroll Instagram or needing to have music on or stuff like that. Think about this if we were in an office, right? Like a big office setting. She'd be somebody that was getting in trouble all of the time, right? That when I was a manager in a big office space, we had office rules where you could not have your headphones on. You had to have one headphone on, but you couldn't have two if you were working. And then they took that away, right? We're thinking about how much better of a place we're in now that we're working virtually when it comes to acceptance for neurodivergent work strategies. I think the most important thing that I would impart on any manager is when you're looking at what an employee needs to get done, the main thing you need to focus on is what is their goal for the end of the day? What amount of work or what tasks they need to have completed by the end of the day? And then anything that you have in your mind about what they need to be spending their day doing to that goal, throw it out the window. Because however they accomplish it, they're an adult that you hired that you should be able to trust to get that work done in the day. And if you can't, you made a wrong hiring choice. Right? That's it. If you can't trust the employee to get to the end goal, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Right. That's my personal opinion. I've worked on a team where, in Google Sheets, when you're working in a spreadsheet, you can see where somebody else has a cell highlighted. And I've had a manager follow me cell by cell, and we were supposed to do each line in a certain amount of minutes. And if you got caught up on a line, then you needed to move on and highlight it, and somebody at a higher level would come in and address that later, right? For an ADHD brain, I'm telling you right now, there is nobody across the spectrum of ADHD diagnoses that's going to be able to work under those conditions.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to work. So for me, I was able to see like, okay, if I take this spreadsheet and unlock it, sort it, put it in the right order, get the ones that are similar next to each other, get it in a different, maybe alphabetical is not working for me, but by number order works for me. You know, whatever it was that was making my brain work for that day. And then, you know, taking my time to power through the ones that I know are similar. My brain can really, really work well in that way, because then you can find the shortcuts and not be duplicating work a million times, right? That really, really, really worked for me in a way that just going line by line and all over the place didn't work for me. It's also really, really important, I think, I've mentioned this before, if you have somebody that's neurodivergent and says they need to do work in another way, it is imperative of you as a manager to watch what this other way is that they're doing their work if they're succeeding at it, because you may be able to change your process.
Yeah.
To make it more inclusive. I think we also have a training, a DEI training called in neurodivergent inclusive training practices. That basically, you know, the gist of that training is that when you're teaching a subject to someone, you have to be prepared to present it in a different way if they're not grasping it, right? There's people that, not just ADHD, but people that are dyslexic or dyspraxic or dysgraphic, where they are not comprehending what you're saying in the manner that you're saying it, right? So always be prepared to teach something in a way that's not your go-to that you do every time. Yeah, that's my take.
I think it's interesting too. Just I think that there's a responsibility on our side as well to understand that not everybody thinks like we do.
Yeah.
And so it's like finding that happy medium, because I've worked with people who are just like adamant that the way they're doing it is the best way, and you know, it's like you're saying, but sometimes there's reasons for other things. So you know, we have to be open to understand why, you know, our managers or somebody may not want to see all the details, like I was saying earlier. Like they don't have time, they don't need it, they trust me, but I feel a need to, like, it's almost a cultural thing too. Like, you know, I'm dealing with all the countries around the world. Some countries they need to explain to me every single step of what they've done, because that's their culture. So I sit and I listen and I enjoy it. And my ADD sometimes does not enjoy it, because I'm like, yeah, I get it. Keep going. I get it. But it's you know, it's almost thinking of it from that perspective too. We have to understand that other people don't necessarily think the way we do.
Yeah.
So I think it does go both ways. Does anybody else have anything on workplace inclusivity? All right, we're gonna get to the fun stuff now. We get the last question. This is the fun part of the call. You ready?
Ready.
Oh.
All right, let's start with Cody. How have you learned to adapt and maneuver your life to accommodate your ADHD? Do you have any tips or insights you could share?
Yeah, so, you know, something that is a major part of not just my ADHD, but the intersection of my multiple diagnoses is that something I do all the time. If there is silence, what I'm doing behind my eyes is reliving a past conversation and then working out all of the details of how I could have done it better, right? Or reliving a childhood trauma and thinking about how I could have done it differently, or some instance where I didn't get what I wanted and how I could have done it to get the outcome that I wanted, right? I overthink in hindsight. So
I overthink in future, so that was very interesting for me. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. But all of that has really, you know, I used to see that as something that needed to be tamped down. It's the reason that I take a sleeping medication, so that when I lay my head down in my pillow at night, I can sleep and not do that all night, because I will if I'm not medicated. And often on the same 2 or 3 childhood experiences that it doesn't matter. You cannot redo and relive that moment, Cody. Move the hell on, right? But what all of this has cultivated in me is that attention to detail thing we were talking about before. If I spend so much time thinking about how I could have done things better, then I'm finding all of those little details of what I did wrong, and I can apply that in my life, right? That's an adaptation that I can use to sort of evolve and level myself up so that now I try to incorporate that kind of thinking to what's in front of me instead of what's in the past. I also, we talk about adapting and maneuvering, learning when it's appropriate for me to take my medication and when it isn't was important for me too. Because there are some days when there is no amount of adaptation and mental gymnastics I can do to make my brain work in the way that it needs to work, right? So I have to take my medication. Friday's an example. On Friday, we were interviewing 12 different people for the position of co-chair of the Young Professionals Network. I had 12 15-minute interviews back to back. Without my medication, I would have probably glommed on to one of the first couple of interviews and said, this is my candidate, and not been able to be stricken from that, right? I'm rigidly unflexible sometimes, right? I have found the one, and my brain keeps telling me, don't forget how good they were. Don't forget how good they were. So then the other people are talking and it's like, wah, 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 But if I take my medication, I can give each person their own space, right? And then afterwards we look at the whole picture. But part of my adaptation through that was the whole time I was keeping a spreadsheet up with, even though I took a page of notes for everybody, on my spreadsheet, I had name, highlights, right? What's the pro? What's the con? How can they change the game, right? And then as they were going, I'm adjusting and ranking people, right? This is more steps than normally somebody would take in these interviews, right? But at the end of the day, now I can look back at my spreadsheet and go, yeah, I can see why I ranked them this way and why it's important. Like now I can remember all 12 of those interviews in a way that I couldn't have if I didn't take my medication and didn't write it all down. That's just a brief example of me adapting to my ADHD. That's the real world example that just happened.
All right, Carly, how about you?
I think for me, it's knowing that as our body changes and as we change, that we may have to try different medication, right? Because it may stop working or you may be reacting to it differently. So for me, I've, more recently had to try a new medication because I felt like my other one wasn't working as well anymore. And now I love this one. It's amazing. And also, Megan, as you said, we don't take it all the time. That is something newer that I'm doing now. I don't take it on the weekends anymore so that I can be more creative and more, just my normal, a little kooky self. And I loved it. My daughter loves it. And I'm able to, think of more arts and crafts and things to do with her and not so focused on one thing. We've got to finish this thing first before we can move on to the next thing. So, just really for me, trial and error. And it's always going to be trial and error because my brain changes constantly, I feel like. So just figuring out what's best for me in that moment and then, roll with it as it moves.
Well, before I go to Morgan, I can tell you from my perspective, my adapting is just allowing myself patience because, there's things that I will upset me and I'll focus on. I don't think I told this story the last time, but I spoke when I first started here. I spoke at we were still in COVID time, so it was in the world. But I spoke at shareholder session, and my voice started getting breathy. When you get nervous, and I literally finished, and I walked out, and I was like, I'm out. I was like, I'm getting fired. I was getting fired in my head. I was looking up, well, maybe I could be a writer. I the whole night I focused on this. I had just killed my entire career. And meanwhile, nobody barely even noticed. And it was 3 years ago and everything's fine. So from that, I can now laugh at that moment. But I was like, well, that was a good run. It was a good few months. So I've learned from things like that to just be like, Megan, just, what, maybe tomorrow it's not going to be as bad. Maybe don't focus so much on this, so trying to talk myself back from, those kind of hyper focused things. I just try to be kinder to myself, to be honest with you. That's one of my adaptations. So Morgan, what's something you've learned or do or share any insights?
For me, I think I'm the only one who does not take medication. And the reason that I don't take medication isn't because I haven't tried. I have tried medicine, and it makes me not think of anything and not want to do anything. I'm just kind of kind of dumb a little bit when I take medication. So for me, the way that I really deal with it, because like Cody was saying, I could super relate to you, because for me, I'm in my head a lot, and I think a lot about my past, things that people did to me in the past, things that I could have corrected in the past. That's a big thing for me. And I'm like, why am I always in my head? That normally happens at night. So the way that I really combat it is really no combating that, though, in my personal opinion. It's a constant thing and a daily struggle that I deal with. But the only way that I can stop from overthinking my past is being creative. So this job that I have now is really helping me a lot more, because I'm able to use my creativity at a level I never was able to use it in my past. So again, like I said, when I listen to a song while I'm creating content, it really helps me. I have to allow myself breaks.
Cats help too. Sorry.
No, you're good. So funny. I have to allow myself breaks throughout the day, because if I just straight focus on my work, sometimes it doesn't work out for me. So for me, it's a daily struggle, just because I probably could take medicine, but again, not only does medicine not help, but I also have another underlying thing that I have to work around. So because I take medication for that. So it's been interesting, to say the least, navigating adulthood. But one thing that I now hold very, very close to me is I have a therapist that I speak with once a week, and she helps me learn how to control my impulsivity, learn how to control my overthinking, and kind of just creating a guide map for me to be successful. And I think the time that I got my therapist was a good time, because it allowed me to maneuver into this role. Because like you, if I messed up on anything, Megan, I know you were saying oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. That was me, even though I knew my manager, and my manager is my mentor, my old manager. I'm she's gonna fire me. There's no way. She's I can't believe I did this. This is crazy. So I was always like that, but getting a therapist to help me walk through that stuff and talk through that stuff is kind of like my medicine for my ADHD. So she helps me a lot. That's the only way I'm able to stay afloat. Otherwise, I'd be stuck in my head and probably crying right now.
It's a lot. Well, I'm going to actually, if you don't mind, Cody, I was going to pass it back to you to close us up, because you organized this whole thing with Carly and Morgan, and I just got to jump in here and have fun. So I would love if you or Carly or Morgan want to close us out here, and thank you for allowing me to host.
So I just want to share with everybody that this is a production of the Healthy Mind Collective. The EXP Healthy Mind Collective is a one EXP resource group that's all about mental health. And it's a great resource for you if you need somebody to talk to. If you want to talk about a topic, you can bring that to Carly and she can help you get an event organized to talk about it. We really, the Healthy Mind Collective is on the move and is growing and is a fantastic organization. And I just want to draw attention to folks. If you've listened all the way through this and you're not a member of Healthy Mind Collective, please go join. The information is scrolling across the bottom right now. You can just search EXP Healthy Mind Collective or just HMC in Workplace. Both of them work. I also want to call out that we currently have a major opportunity because Carly is our sole chair at the moment of Healthy Mind Collective, and we're looking for somebody with the passion and the time and the energy to help her along in this journey and be her co-chair. So if you think that person is you, reach out to me, reach out to Carly. We would love to talk to you about it, talk about what that means, what that entails, and how you can apply yourself. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and just encourage you to join the Healthy Mind Collective. Check out 1EXP in our bi-weekly newsletter for more about what 1EXP is all about. And don't forget to subscribe to EXP's official diversity, equity, and inclusion podcast, which is called CultureCast, hosted by me. It's bi-weekly. We've got fantastic guests. Everybody on this session has been a guest, I think. Megan, have you ever been a guest of the CultureCast?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, you're going to be.
Okay.
All right. But check us out. EXP CultureCast is available on all the major platforms. It's on YouTube if you like video. If you're okay with audio, we got Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbay. Just go find us, EXP CultureCast. We'll leave you with that. Thank you, everybody, for having us. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.